Alrighty, morning again. Let's go ahead and get started. So, objectives. By the end of this lesson, students will be able to solve BGCSE past paper questions involving wages and salaries. And so, like I said last session, today we're going to spend time looking at questions that would have come on past BGCSE papers. Because it's okay to say, all right, I know how to solve wages and salaries questions, but you also need to prove to yourself that you are comfortable and ready for the level of questioning that comes on the BGCSE. And I can guarantee you that almost every year there's either a question on hire purchase or wages and salaries, or maybe even both. So you have to be comfortable working these questions. And so we're going to get right into our first question. What I'm going to do, I'll read the question, give you 5 minutes to work it, and then we'll do it together. So the first question says, a gardener works a basic week of 38 hours at a rate of $4.50 per hour. A, calculate the amount earned for a basic week. Then it goes on to say he worked 44 hours in 1 week. B, how many hours of overtime did he work? Overtime is paid at time and a half. Calculate. I, the amount paid for 1 hour of overtime. I is total overtime pay. And then, part 1, part 2. So part 3 says his total earnings for a 44-hour week. I'm going to give you 5 minutes, which is plenty time to attempt the question. So last session, we talked about how to calculate the basic week. We went over the definitions as to what overtime is and what it means when we see time and a half. All of these bits of information are going to be very important to helping you in solving these questions today. I also want to encourage you to take your time, make sure you check over. You don't want to make simple or silly mistakes that can end up causing you in the end. The point was brought out that usually your answer from A has an impact on your answer in B and then C. So be very careful in, you're working and checking over. All right, so we have just over a minute. If you're done, go ahead and post all of your answers for this question in the Q&A section, because we're going to compare our answers. All right, so I'm checking the Q&A. So far, I see one response. I'll give you a little bit more time. Giving you a little bit more time because I want to see more responses to the question. So far, I have 2 persons that are responding. Gabriel, and I'm like our panelist said, I'm going to encourage you to just check over your calculations. Anonymous attendee, Tanya, I see posted her full response. Lenora also posted. So let's go ahead and go through the question. So again, to recap what it says, we're told that a gardener works a basic week of 38 hours at a rate of $4.50 per hour. Calculate the amount earned for a basic week. Well, we know we're going to take the hours and multiply by the rate. So that would be $38 multiplied by $4.50. And once I multiply that, my answer would have been $171. All right, moving on. It says that he worked 44 hours in 1 week. How many hours of overtime did he work? Well, if his basic week is 38 hours, anything additional or outside of that 38 hours must be considered overtime. So we're going to do 44 take away 38, which tells me that he worked 6 hours. At this point, I'm going to ask you to make or be very sure that you are putting in your units, because I don't want you to just write 6 hours or $171, so that you are sure and we're all sure as to what you're saying, especially when you get into that BGCSE exam. Overtime is paid at time and a half. Calculate, part 1, the amount paid for 1 hour of overtime. Well, we know time and a half means to multiply my regular rate by 1.5, which gives me $6.25. $6.75, sorry. Next, they say his overtime pay. Well, we know his overtime hours is 6 hours, and we know for each of those 6 hours, he's going to get paid $6.75. And so we combine the two by multiplying them. We find that for his overtime for those 6 hours worked, he made $40.50. And then the last part of the question asks me to find his total earnings for a 44-hour week. We know that for a 44-hour week, he worked 6 hours overtime and made $40.50. And then for those first 38 hours, he made $171. So his total is going to be $171 plus the $40.50 for overtime. That week in total, he made $211.50. So I'm just checking the Q&A section really quickly, and I see a good number of persons got it right. If you didn't, please use this time to address the mistakes, correct them. All right, but I do see 1 or 2 persons in the Q&A that got it correct. So go ahead and give yourself a pat on the back if you did. If not, just make your corrections quickly. Let me at this time also say that this lesson will be uploaded as soon as the lesson is done. I went on the virtual learning website this morning, and I do see the lesson from yesterday has already been uploaded. So at any point, if you need the lessons, just go back to them, and they have my PowerPoints with my answers as well as my talking points throughout the lesson. Alrighty, let's move on to our next question. And again, all of these questions come directly from the BGCSE exam. This question is about Tracy. So it says, Tracy works 6.5 hours per day from Monday to Wednesday and 8 hours per day on Thursday and Friday. She is paid $8.10 per hour. Calculate, part 1, the number of hours worked per week. Part 2, her weekly earnings. Then they say she receives an increase in pay, and her new weekly earnings are $301.75 for the same number of hours. B, calculate her new hourly rate. So this question includes or requires a bit more thinking, but I know that you can handle it. Another 5 minutes to attempt the question. So we know that from this question, we can see that Tracy works 6.5 hours for the first 3 days of the week. And then the next 2 days, she works 8 hours. So from that, we can calculate how many hours she worked for the full week. Then we know she is paid $8.10 per hour. So every hour she works, she's going to get paid $8.10. So I so far see 2 responses in the Q&A. 3 responses. 3 responses so far. And again, I'm going to encourage you to make sure you're checking your steps before you decide on a final answer. Last class, I gave you, I guess, some short formulas to use. I think it'll be very helpful to refer back to those formulas. I wouldn't even call them full formulas, but just suggestions or tips on how to work the questions. Refer back to them as needed. So I see more answers popping up. What I'm going to ask is that you submit all of your answers together. So like Gabriel, I see your answers, but you're putting them in separate questions. Can you just put them all together? So work the full question and then submit all of your answers. Thank you. You have just over a minute left. Just over 1 minute left. So I see Daniel Strawn put an answer. Daniel Strawn has an answer. Andrew Nash, also submitted a response. I like that you're checking and making the necessary corrections. Your time, you have about 30 seconds left, and we'll look at it together. Okay, I see a message from Deontay. So let's look at the response. I also see Sky's response. So let's look at the question together and check to see what you did. So again, Mrs. Tracy works 6.5 hours per day from Monday to Wednesday and 8 hours per day on Thursday and Friday. She is paid $8.10 per hour. Calculate the number of hours worked per week. Well, what we needed to know is how many hours she worked Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, which was 3 days. So I'm going to multiply 6.5 by 3. And then Thursday and Friday, she worked 8 hours. So we're going to multiply 8 by 2, since that was 2 days. Through my working, I get 19.5 plus 16. In total, she worked 35.5 hours. I saw some persons put 35.5 hours. That's okay. But with time, let's try to express it as fractions. But if you do the decimal, it's fine. Weekly earnings. So I'm going to take the number of hours she worked, which was 35.5, and multiply by $8.10. And that tells me that in total, she made for that week $287.55. Continuing on with the question, they tell me that she receives a an increase in her pay. And so now for that same number of hours, 35.5 hours, she's going to get paid $301.75. She got an increase, but she's working the same number of hours. So it's still 35.5 hours. Calculate her new hourly rates. What I'm going to do, $301.75 divided by 35.5. I find that in total, she made $8.50 as her new hourly rate, or $8.50 per hour. If you got it, give yourself a pat on the back. If not, use this time to make the corrections and the adjustments. Like I said, this session will be recorded and uploaded to the virtual learning system as soon as I'm done. So if you miss anything from today or even yesterday's lesson, please go back and review the PowerPoint along with the working. All right, another 30 seconds or so, and then we'll look at our third question for the day. Here's our third question. Tamara is paid $6.80 per hour for the first 40 hours worked in a week. Overtime is paid at time and a half. Calculate her earnings for a regular 40-hour week, 1 hour overtime, and a 46-hour week. Last week, she earned $292.40. Calculate the amount of hours she worked. So you have same amount of time. I'm going to give you 5 minutes to work the problem. Remember, when you share your responses in the Q&A, please post all of your answers together. We have one response in the Q&A section so far. And again, to everyone, I see another response, but to everyone, I'm going to encourage you, make sure you're checking over your answers, especially when you sit in that BGCSE exam. I don't want you to just rush through and write an answer and then move on. Check your answer first. Make sure it's correct. Like I always tell my students, you don't want to lose 1 or 2 points because of a very small error or a very silly mistake, because that 1 or 2 points can be the difference between the D and the C grade, or even the C grade and the A grade or the B grade. So, take your time, be very careful, make sure you check over, especially when you're working with a question that's as straightforward as, wages and salaries. And with the time you have on the BGCSE, you have a good bit of time, so don't rush through. Take your time and check. Especially when you finish the exam and you have maybe like 20 or 30 minutes left over, that's not free time. That's not time to just go to sleep or chill. That's your time to check over the paper. All right. So you have just over a minute left. So I'm giving persons more, time to submit their answers in the Q&A section. Again, if you can, please put all of your answers. Don't just submit the answer for part A1. I want you to put all of your answers together. So far, I see responses from Daniel, Andronique, Chardonnay. Samuel also put a response in the group, in the Q&A section. Tatiana, I see your response. So 40 seconds. So if you have your answer, you should be working to type them into the Q&A section. And then we're going to take a chance to compare. So I see 8 responses. Gabrielle posted a response. Franklin posted the rest of his response. Let's look at it together. And remember, this is just an opportunity to practice. So if you see something that you need to work on, use this as an opportunity to make improvements. All right, so let's move on. Question says, again, Tamara is paid $6.80 per hour for the first 40 hours worked in a week. Overtime is paid at time and a half. Calculate her earnings for part 1, a regular 40-hour week. We're going to do 40 times $6.80, $272. So if you got that, good job. If you didn't, make the corrections. Part 2, 1 hour overtime. That's going to be $6.80 times 1.5, which is $10.20. A 46-hour week. And I'll walk through it. Because she worked 6 hours overtime, she made a total of $61.20 for those 6 hours. When I add that to the amount of money she makes for the 40 hours, which was $272, her total is going to be Right here is the total amount of money she makes, $333.20. Part B says last week she earned $292.40. Calculate the amount of hours she worked. Well, let's think about what we know. We do know that for the first 40 hours she made $272. So what I know she worked at least 40 hours. I need to figure out how many hours of overtime did she work. So I start by subtracting the 272 to determine how much overtime pay she received. When I subtract, I get 2040, which means that's how much money she made in overtime. If I divide that by 1020, I now know how many hours of overtime she worked. 2 hours. And I'm going to combine the two. I know she worked 40 hours regularly and she worked 2 hours overtime. So in total, she worked 42 hours. Please make the adjustment because I saw a number of persons got 43 hours. She in fact worked 42 hours. Alrighty, here's the next question. Again, we have another 5 minutes on the question. All right, so for those persons that just joined, you're working on this question and we will work through it together. Again, as a reminder, work the full question and then post your answer to each section together in one response in the Q&A section. So far I see Daniel has an answer and then Andronique. Good stuff. I would like to challenge more persons to submit answers, so because I think we have, at this point, we have about 30 students in the group, but I think on average, maybe about 8%, 7 to 8 persons have been responding. So please share your answer. If you're shy, feel free to use the chat. It is private, but myself as well as the other panelists, we want to see how you're working through the problems to see if there's anything we need to address. Again, I'm going to walk through the steps again. Remember to find the wage. We just multiply the total hours worked by the rate per hour. And then to find the overtime pay for an hour, we're going to multiply the hourly pay times 1.5, and that's because they tell me time and a half. And then to find the total for 44 hours, well, I know I have to figure out how many hours Mr. Joy worked overtime. And once I find that, I can multiply by my overtime pay or my overtime rate for 1 hour. And then I can add that to the wage for a 38-hour week. So I see a good bit of responses popping up. I see Samuel, Lenico, LaShawn, Sky, Tanya, Gabriel, Shiloh, Tatiana, Brene. Okay. Franklin also posted an answer. So let's go ahead and work through the problem. Again, I'll read it. It says, Mr. Joy works a basic week of 38 hours at a rate of $3.40 per hour. Calculate his wage for the 38-hour week. Again, I'm going to multiply his basic week, or the number of hours he worked, times the rate, which tells me how much he gets paid per hour, which in this case is $3.40. Once I multiply the two in my calculator, and I'm always checking to make sure I got this right, it's going to be $129.20. Overtime is paid at time and a half. Calculate his overtime pay per hour. Well, they taught me that his rate per hour for a regular hour is $3.40, but they say for overtime is going to be paid at time and a half, or 1.5. And so I'm going to multiply the two together. 340 times 1.5. 340 times 1.5, which when I multiply gives me $5.10 of overtime. For overtime, sorry, which means every hour that he works for overtime, he's going to get paid $5.10 per hour. Then they say calculate the amount Mr. Joy earns in a week when he works 44 hours. I need to first determine how many hours he worked. So I subtract 44, take away 38. That gives me 6 hours. I know that he's working 6 hours of overtime this week. To determine how much money he's going to get paid for those 6 hours, I multiply by $5.10, which gives me a total of $30.60. My total pay is going to be $129.20 plus $30.60, which is $159.80. Please make corrections and address whatever problems you might have had. And let me encourage you, this is our time to work on the questions, to address whatever problems we do have. So I really, really want to hear from everyone in the group. And even if you want to just speak privately in the chat, like I see one person did, feel free to. We're going to try our best to answer you. There are about 3 or 4 math teachers in the chat, and we're all trying our best to address whatever questions that you do have. All right, let's move on. I think we have time for one more question. All right, let's try this last question. Remember, if you speak to us in the chat, that's private, so everyone won't see the discussion that we have. If you feel as if you're still a little bit shy or nervous about working out the question, so you have 2 areas where you can post your responses. But I definitely want to hear from you, and I'm happy that I heard from a lot more persons in this last question. So again, you're working through the question. Based on the time, this may be the last question we get to go through, but I think I have another question in my PowerPoint. I'll put it up on the screen so that when you go through the live recording on the ministry's virtual learning website, you will still have access to that question. All right, so far I already got 2 responses in the group, but I see they're slightly different for C. So I'm going to encourage everyone, make sure you're checking over your answers before you submit a response. And this is a very crucial, very, very crucial step with the BGCSE, because you don't want to lose 1 point over a concept or a skill that you know, and you just maybe made a mistake in writing your responses. So take your time to check. Always check to make sure that you calculate it properly, you put everything into your calculator correctly, and then you wrote them down on your paper properly. Just to check the time. Let's see how much more time you have. I'm going to give you another minute or so. You have another 1.5 minutes left. All right, I see my Q&A section lighten up. Let's see who all 10 responses. Wow. Daniel, Andronique, Chardonnay, Gabriel, and I hope I'm saying your name properly. Tatiana, Shiloh, I see Andronique addressed her response. She corrected it. Samuel, Sky, Lenico. These responses look so good, man. Tanya. All right. So you have about 20 seconds. You have about 20 seconds left. I also see a response from Deontay. All right, let's go ahead and read the question first. I'm gonna go ahead and read the question first. Alrighty, so Tom Green works a basic week of 35 hours at a rate of $4.10 per hour. Calculate his wage for the 35-hour week. And then they tell me overtime is paid at time and a half. Calculate his overtime paid for 1 hour. And then see the amount Mr. Green earns in a week when he works 46 hours. Let's see how we did. 35 times 410, which is 143.50, and I saw just about everyone that submitted a response got that correctly. Now let's look at part B. B speaks to his overtime. How much is he going to get paid for 1 hour of overtime? Well, 410 times 1.5, which is 615. And then here we want to know how much money he's going to make for 46 hours. Well, once we figure out how many hours that is of overtime, I can calculate his overtime pay and then add that into his total pay, which is $211.15. All right, so if you didn't get any part of it, take your time and make the corrections. Let me also encourage you. Another thing that I see students sometimes do, they just put answers. You can't just put an answer. In working these problems, make sure you show your steps, because a lot of times these questions are 2-point questions, which means a part of your answer is going to be assessed. And so even if maybe you wrote the wrong number, like let's take, for example, for question A, let's say that question A, let's say that question A was a 2-point question. And I'm going to put the 2 there. I'm going to change my pen. And let's say I did this first step properly, but my second step, I wrote 130. I could actually use the typing thing. Let's do that. So let's say for the second part of this answer, instead of writing 143, I wrote 134.50. Here's why it's important to show my steps. Because if it's a 2-point question, obviously the first point is for this step here. So instead of, losing everything, I could still get some points from my working being correct. And so I'm going to encourage you to not just write your answers, but be sure to show your working, because you want to get the maximum number of points for this exam. I'm going to remove that. All right, so just because I want to be mindful of time, I'm going to show the last question and then show the answer, so that when you're working on your own, if need be, you can go through and pause the video and look at the question. So I'm just posting this for those persons that are going to check it out at a later time. I'm not going to leave it up for long. Here's the last question, and here are the answers. So if you want to work through this question on your own, check out the live lesson or the recorded lesson once it's been posted, and work through it. All right, let me display the question again. But what I want to do, I want to come into the Q&A section, and I want to hear from everyone. How do you feel in connection to wages and salaries if a question were to come on the BGCSE? That's first question. Second question, if there were any topics that you would like to perhaps review or think, would be good if we had a review session on, please post them now, because we want to, tailor these lessons as much as possible to the audience that we do have. So again, the two questions I asked: how do you feel about wages and salaries going into the BGCSE? And then, are there any topics that you might want help with moving forward? I see y'all posting in the chats. I'm happy that Tatiana says she feels good about wages and salaries. I see she also said simple interest. So we could look at simple interest, because that question could be tricky, especially when we're talking about the time. Simultaneous equations with matrices, that's Andronique Nash. Okay, so we're looking at some paper 3 concepts. Trigonometry is also important because that comes every year. Trigonometry is going to come: speed, distance, and time. Then finding the gradient of a parabola. Trigonometry. And so I'm asking I'm going to try to make a note of this. Let me write, but my panelists are also making a note of what you're saying, because we want to try to make sure that you're prepared in the event we have our BGCSE this year. Giovanna, I'm happy that you're confident with wages and salaries. So just to recap what I see graphs of linear as well as quadratic equations. There's some trigonometry, simultaneous equations. Now, Andronique, I am going, as well as Tatiana, I see both of you address the same question. In terms of paper 3, I can't promise you that we will address a good number of paper 3 questions, just because we want to focus on the core, because every single student that sits the BGCSE will sit paper 1 and 2, whereas, a significantly smaller number of students will sit the paper 3. However, I'm going to see if, we can find a way to get some work to you if possible. All right. So I have all of your responses, and I think my panelists would have taken note as well. Thank you so much for sharing with us. You asked, is there any way the ministry would be willing to allow a teacher to have these classes for extended instead of core? Well, I tell you what, a ministry official is in on this lesson. I'll forward your question over, and we'll see. But I don't want you to think that it's just extended. You have to focus on the core as well. You have to be extremely strong in your core in order to pass the extended. And so I think you're still going to get a lot of benefit out of working on the core. I also see another respondee saying they need help with speed, distance, and time. All right, another point before I leave, because I'm going to end this session right now. Please take note that your Easter break does begin next week, Monday. Well, actually, today is the last day of classes. And so we will not have class next week because we will observe the Easter break. And then depending on what decision is made from our Prime Minister, We may be back together after the Easter break if you're not, or if we're not back in regular school. All right, so take care, everyone. Please be safe. Please practice social distancing. Please stay home if you don't need to be. All right, everyone, take care and enjoy your weekend.
Welcome to this unit in our math lessons, where we will be learning about the different ways to practice measuring in standard units. So as we get started, let's look and read some new words you will be seeing. These are called math vocabulary or math keywords. Vocabulary is a list of words that a person knows and uses. So as we get started, you're going to see some new words, but as we learn and we study, they will not be so new to you anymore. Let's get started. Estimate. To estimate is to take a guess about how many or how much. Centimeter. Centimeter. A metric unit that is used to measure length or distance. Height. How high someone or something is. Length. How long something is. Measure. To find out how much or how big something is. Meter. The main unit of length in the metric system. Units. An amount used in measuring or counting, such as a centimeter. So as we look back over our math keywords, I want you to repeat after me. Centimeter, estimate, height, measure, meter, length, units. You have been such an awesome group today. I trust that you would continue to learn and use your new math keywords as you go through your math lesson. Thank you.